What we want to talk about this afternoon is collaboration among statewide legal aid programs across the Mountain West. There are, throughout the United States, associations, informal associations of legal aid directors regionally, and there is one for the Mountain West. This one, though, is unusually collaborative. They not only meet once a year, but between meetings, they communicate regularly about best practices and experiences and share what they've learned with others. And we want to delve into what they've been able to accomplish together that they would not have been able to do individually. I'd like to start by asking each briefly to describe your service area, what the environment is in which you provide legal services to low-income people dispersed across a very large geographic area. We'll start with Allison.
Good afternoon. So, if you've not been to Montana, you may not realize that it's the fourth largest state in the country. But we only have about 1 million people. So that breaks down to 6 people per square mile. We also have 28 cows per square mile. And we have 7 Indian reservations, so 7 separate jurisdictions within our state. We are the only legal aid provider in Montana. There are a couple of domestic violence shelters that have 1 staff attorney. We are it. And we only have 17 case handling attorneys for the whole state. We're about 40% LSC funded, and the rest of it's mostly federal funding. With 17 case handling attorneys, that means we have 1 attorney for every 10,000 people in poverty, persons in poverty in the state. There's no way we can serve all those people. And one of the ways we try is early on we were an early adopter of technology as a way to extend our services. So we've received many TIG grants from the Legal Services Corporation, which have dramatically helped us be able to build services that we can deliver remotely. But you have to combine those remote services with actual visits to communities in rural areas. So all of my staff travel. We all deliver statewide services. Our housing attorney, of which we have 1, is the housing attorney for the state and takes cases all the way across the state on pressing issues that come up. We make hard decisions about how to deliver services and what has the most impact on people based on information for our clients. And that's it. That's Montana.
Hello, I'm Eric Middlestaff from Utah Legal Services, and welcome to Utah. Utah Legal Services is the LSC provider for Utah, statewide agency, as Jim said. We're fortunate in Utah to have some great partners. The Legal Aid Society of Salt Lake and the Disability Law Center we're co-located with here in Salt Lake and have a great partnership with them. We do a private bar campaign, the End Justice for All campaign, and actually share some of those proceeds with other legal services providers, smaller providers from around the state. So a great sense of coordination and collaboration in Utah, regionally and as well here in the state. Just like Montana, Utah's a very large state. There are about 3 million people in Utah. One of the unique aspects is that 85% of those people live within 15 miles of the Wasatch Front. That's the Wasatch, the front of the Wasatch Mountain Range. You're sitting there right now, but about 40 miles to the north of Ogden, 45 miles south of Provo, all along that corridor, 85% of the state's population. So the other main population areas in St. George, Utah, which is in the southwest corner, there are great growth. So it leaves large portions of the state where there are fewer than 1 person per square mile. And just to give folks from back east a little bit of perspective on that, Utah's divided into 29 counties. One of them is San Juan County, which is the southwest or southeast corner of the state where the Navajo Reservation comes into Utah. It's roughly the size of the state of New Jersey. But living in San Juan County, there's about 9 million fewer people in the state of New Jersey. So there are 15,000 people live in that very large county. It does make for challenges in terms of providing equal access and equal services across the state when you have such a very geographical area to cover.
Anna Marie. Good afternoon. The state of Nevada is actually the 8th largest state in the union, and We have a population of 3 million. 2.2 million of that population lives in Las Vegas. And the vast majority of the rest of the population actually lives in what we call the Reno-Carson corridor. They're only about 20 miles apart, and in that valley, about 15% of the remaining population lives. That leaves a very, very vast area for the remaining 10%. And they are spread out throughout that entire area. Just to give you a bit of perspective, the 5 counties that make up the northeast quadrant of the state of Nevada is the size of the state of Florida. And there are 50,000 people living in that area. And it is less than 1 person per square mile. And we do have lots of cows and sheep, many more cows and sheep per square mile than we have people. Somebody this morning said during the presentation that cell phones are the great equalizer. Well, they're not in Nevada. It is just not cost effective for the providers to put cell towers out where people are. There are simply too few people to sign up for service to make it cost effective to put a cell tower. So trying to reach the people that live out there where there is nothing for them to get our services is difficult. And we are on the road a lot. The only way that we have to serve some of these communities is for our staff to be out there on the road. We do have sister organizations in Nevada. There are 4 of them, and they only work in Las Vegas and Reno, and they serve niche populations. So it is left up to Nevada Legal Services to provide the overall expanse of services that low-income Nevadans need.
I believe that Allison mentioned reservations in Montana. Could I ask Eric and Anna Marie to talk about reservations in your states? Because this is another point of commonality, but also of difference among the states.
We have 23 reservations in the state of Nevada, and they are spread across the state. They go from the borders of Idaho and Oregon, and I've got 2 reservations. I don't have them. The state has 2 reservations that straddle both borders. So members of the tribe will live in one state or the other, and the reservations then go all the way south to the very southern tip that meets where California and Arizona meet.
There are 8 reservations in the state of Utah. Our main practice areas are the Ute Reservation, which is about 3 hours travel from Salt Lake City out into the Uinta Basin, and also the Iroquois Reservation. And to get to the Iroquois Reservation, you actually go through Nevada. You have to drive into Nevada and then back into Utah just to get to that reservation.
Jim, what about Idaho?
Thank you, and it's an honor to be here. Idaho is very similar to these other states in many ways. We are a very large state. We have about 1.8 million people. We are growing very fast right now. We tied for first in growth last year with Nevada, and before that, we were the top in growth per capita in the U.S. Our population is primarily Anglo, but we have a very large and growing Latino population, about 11%. We have 5 Native American reservations, which stretch from pretty much right at the Canadian border down to straddling the Nevada border. We are about 60% federally owned, and which makes our population kind of interesting where we're located. Unlike some of the other states, I think our population is probably more equally spread throughout the state. We have 7 towns of size. And we have an office in each one of those 7 towns. Our unemployment rate right now is less than 3%, and it has been screaming hot for a long time. And while that is great in many ways, it's not so great in other ways. We were just talking at lunch about housing. And housing in Boise, which is where I live, which is the primary population center, I believe it grew 8% last year, and it's been growing something like that for a number of years. And so we're actually seeing locals become displaced and moving to other parts, more rural areas because of the costs. We have 7 offices. Like I said, they're kind of spread around the state. They basically go from north to south. We have 45 staff, about half of those are attorneys. And we have a migrant farm worker law unit, and we also have an Indian law unit.
Thank you. I wanted to bring out the point about reservations, a large number of reservations across these states, but one additional point I want to emphasize, practice with reservation populations is hardly monolithic. The delivery of legal services across these states requires practice in tribal courts, which can be very different from one another. And some of these reservations cross state lines, which involves additional complexity in delivering legal services and requires special coordination with other legal services providers serving the portion of a reservation that may not be within your service area. Allison, I want to ask you about the origins of the collaborative effort that you have. How did you come to work closely together, in my view, more closely together than counterpart organizations across the United States?
Sure. Funnily enough, it was a telephone call from LSC to me about 17 years ago.
This was a setup.
I had been LSC had a leadership mentoring program back then, and I had been part of it, so I got to know a bunch of LSC staff. So one of them called me up and said, I've just been to the Southwest directors meeting. Why don't you guys have a directors group? And I said, I don't know. I'll look at it. So I called up this guy and said, why don't we have a directors group? And he said, I don't know, let's do it. So we started it about 17 years ago. Originally, the states involved were Arizona, Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, and Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma seems odd, but it's because we all are statewide programs and we all have significant Native American populations. After we'd been meeting for a while, Washington and Oregon asked if they could join us because they felt left out. And then Alaska and Hawaii, who also share the same characteristics as us, came to join us. So that's the group now. We move our meetings around every year to different states, although we realize we can never go to Hawaii or Alaska because it would look bad. I keep lobbying for it.
So, Jim and Anna Marie, can you give some examples of the types of things that you collaborate on? Examples of situations where being able to consult with colleagues facing similar challenges has been beneficial to you and the clients you serve?
Sure.
I'll take a first crack at it. Well, first off, one thing that I've noticed, so I'm the newest, I think, one of the newest of the directors in this region. And so I came in sort of kind of needed to learn a lot, and a lot of the folks, like Allison, served sort of as mentors for me as I kind of learned the ropes. And the annual meeting that we have, which we just had in Boise a couple weeks ago, last year was in Portland, is a great place for us to get together and we talk about issues. There's a group that meets, kind of comes up with an agenda. So for example, a couple of our offices have had very serious security issues. Last year, someone threatened to come in and shoot up one of our offices. And we've had other folks who this year were talking about other stories. And so security was an issue that we talked about the last 2 years. And so I have learned a whole lot from that and taken away from that, created my own security committee, bought Panic software that someone else recommended. So it's just a lot of, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. So at the executive level, it's been good. It's also been good in that we've collaborated on other trainings. So for example, I became an ED in 13. I think in 14, we collaborated together and we had a managing attorney meeting, training in Boise with folks from a number of the different programs. And then last year we had a staff attorney litigation training in Denver. And again, that had people from a number of the programs. And one of the great things about that is you can send your attorneys to a litigation training in your own state, but when you send them to a training with other legal aid attorneys, it's much more impactful for them because they're in the same kind of cases, they're in the same kind of culture and environment kind of this beleaguered drinking from a fire hose type environment. And I think they get a lot more out of it. And so for our folks, it's, I just think, more impactful and relevant to them.
We also did this past year a training for the trial court advocates that practice in tribal courts, which is very helpful because Mr. Sandman is correct. It is a different area of practice, and they're spread out over such a wide area that it is very good to get them together so that they can compare notes, learn from each other, and have somebody that they know out in the field that they can contact saying, I've got this unique problem, can you help me? The other areas where we've collaborated, we've had cases in the reservations that straddle the borders where I've called up Idaho Legal Services and said, this is a problem on our side, are you seeing it on your side? And can we work together to solve this problem? And we've done that before with our staff working together on issues that straddle the border. We've done that with Oregon, and we've done that with California as well for reservations that straddle the border. And I personally have found the collaboration to be really great because for the same thing, I don't want to have to recreate the wheel if I don't have to. And I can call on another program for assistance or for advice and counsel. And it's easy for me to tell my IT person who's now currently working on trying to get our online intake system up and running, saying, call Utah. They've already done this. They will be able to walk you through what they did and maybe solve some of your questions. And it's a great collaboration to have, not just on our level, but also on the lower staff level.
Eric and Allison, can you give some examples of how you have benefited in your work from your ability to consult with other similarly situated leaders?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing that was really important to us that came out of this group is our centralized intake system. As I mentioned, serving the population that we serve across the state and trying to make sure that we're giving consistent services is very difficult. There was a point in time where we have 4 offices, and there was a point in time where each office did their own intake. And so even though our board sets the priorities of the types of cases that we're handling, the way those got interpreted in the different offices was very different. And so you get a different set of services if you're living in Salt Lake versus living out in San Juan County, or even just from Ogden to Provo. The offices handle things differently. So we knew that we wanted to become a statewide law firm and really give consistent services and make sure that those people in the rural areas are getting the same access that we could give to those who live right down the street from our offices. So we went to a centralized intake system, and the state of Washington, the Northwest Justice Project, was one of the leaders in that in the country. They're in our region, and so we actually sent people up there on a plane to spend a couple of days in Seattle to see how they did things, and basically stole a lot of their system. And as things have gone on over the years, they've stolen some of the ideas we came up with back, and it goes back and forth that way. But really a benefit to us to be able to just go to our partners and see what they've done, and as Anna Marie said, not reinvent those wheels.
Yeah, and one of the things I really appreciate about this group is that we don't really compete for funding because of the way LSC funding is structured and because of the way other grants are structured, and foundations don't often fund across state lines in the same way. So there's no competition. We all just are very happy to share down to even a grant application and say, this is what we used, you should try it, right?
I just want to say before Allison goes on that we all compete with Allison on TIG grants.
34. Didn't get one this year. I think my streak ended, by the way, 20 years.
Did you say 34?
I did.
I just wanted to say that again.
Yeah, I think it's time that we took a year off. Yeah, I counted the other day. Some of the things we've implemented. So Utah has a merit bonus structure for staff, just little incentives to help them. If people are doing exceptional jobs, to be able to give them a little bit of one-time payment. So we implemented that because our staff was really asking for that. Some way, if we're doing a little better, that we could get a merit bonus. It's not very much money, but it's an important process for our staff. It gives them something to work for. We looked at Colorado's legal needs assessment and worked with them on what we could do. for our legal needs. We looked at Northwest Justice Project for their policies. They've got big Seattle law firms that'll do their policies, so we might as well take advantage of
I'm
that.
curious, you suggested that your population may be more evenly distributed across the state than your colleagues here on the table, but aside from Boise and Moscow, Coeur d'Alene, I'm hard pressed to name 7.
Coeur d'Alene, by the way.
Forgive me. How do you serve the large geographic area that you have, and in particular, clients or potential clients who are not located in the 7 locations where you have offices?
Well, to be frank, we don't do the best job of it, and we're trying to do better. One of the problems in my program is a cultural problem, and that is there's a saying that the mountains are high and the emperor is far, and our attorneys and staff, it's a 50-year-old program, and my predecessors were more decentralized than I am, and I think that led to a lot of inconsistency in the terms of services that we provide our client community. And one of my big efforts has been, through our strategic plan last year, was to say we have to become more consistent, because it's not fair if you call in one town, you get a completely different set of services than if you call from another one. And so some of the things that we've tried to do is, first off, I've tried to put in more consistency in terms of training of our managing attorneys and expectations of our staff attorneys. We've tried to, we also have 3 hotlines: a domestic violence legal advice line, a senior line, and a housing hotline, which really help us with rural folks. Something we've done this year, which has made me very unpopular in the firm, is go with a more centralized intake system. We went through 10 different phone numbers to apply to 1 as of July. Our intakes are up 57%. But to do that, we had to fundamentally reorder how we work with our support staff. We now have intake specialists, and that was not a popular thing to do. And so it's been difficult and a lot of pushback, but we think the results are worth it. What we're doing now is, so that was as of July, we just last month signed a contract for a new online intake system, because we understand that young people today seem to go initially to online for their solutions to problems, and so we should be oriented to their needs. And so the hope is that the majority of our intakes in the future will be online. Right now we get 8% online. I want to get 60, 70% online. Not only is it easy for them because they don't have to, they can call whenever they want, apply whenever they want, but also it's quicker for our staff. I mean, my attitude is if I can save 1 or 2 minutes on each intake, as compared to a telephonic intake, and we have 3,000 or 4,000 clients a year, well, that's a lot of savings in time. And they can use that time to help with client service. So another thing we did was the LSC was nice enough to give us a pro bono innovation grant, which we used to create a web-based system for our attorney referral program. It's called Idaho Volunteer Lawyers Program. It's not part of us, but it's a partner. And that now allows folks to find volunteer opportunities online, and then and get notice if they go online and they don't see a case they want. The system will send them, they can put in the characteristics of the case they want. I want a family law case in this rural county. And when that person comes in and their opportunity is posted, the system will send them an email saying, hey, the case you want is now available. So we're trying to get more private attorneys as well in rural areas involved. So those are probably the primary things.
Thank you. I'd like to conclude by asking each of you to describe the most common kinds of legal problems you see from your client communities, and the extent to which you are able to draw on your collaborators in other states to get information on how to serve those types of problems, or are they different from one state? We've got 2 states here that have very high growth rates, and Jim mentioned problems with housing, availability of housing for low-income people in an environment where business is booming for some parts of the population. But I'm just curious about whether you see different legal issues based on the situations in your individual states. Allison?
Sure. We do see availability of housing, and that often has to do with really rural areas where there just isn't any housing, but people still need to live in basic communities. I would say that one thing that I really leaned on colleagues for is serving Native American populations. We lost our senior Native American, the attorney that did our Indian work, left suddenly, and I had a new young attorney who really wanted it, but she didn't have a lot of experience. And so I was able to call the experienced people in these other states and say, how do you guys do it? Should we be serving, we have one person and basically a paralegal and an AmeriCorps member. How do we do that? How do you serve 7 reservations? And we went from serving just one reservation, which the previous guy had done, to now she's talked to a whole bunch of people and structured it so she's doing a much better job of penetrating around the state.
There are a lot of similarities. I think nearly half of the work we do is for victims of domestic violence, and I think that's common among our programs. And the housing, I can share with you, I mentioned the Community Legal Center here in Salt Lake, where we're co-located. 17 years ago when we moved into that office, we were sort of in the middle of almost nothing. We could park in any of the vacant lots around our building. If you drive by now, just a few blocks away from here, you'll see that we're surrounded now by apartment buildings. And they're apartments that are not only can our clients not afford, our staff can't afford to live in them. And so the affordable housing crisis really is common. I think in the West there's just so much growth. Let me just mention also that another thing that's common among our programs is our agricultural worker units. And we did a meeting of those staff regionally a year ago, and I think it's going to be an annual event for those staff to get together because there are common issues, not just the agricultural work, but out here you heard mention of the sheep and the cows. We have people who are brought into the country to do sheep herding, and then they have issues that go across state lines and trafficking issues that are common among us.
Our biggest legal issue in Nevada is housing. Last year, it was 58% of the casework that we did. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition came out with a report in September that ranked the state of Nevada dead last in the availability of affordable housing. That report shows that there are 15 affordable housing units available for every 100 people applying for housing. And then the rest of that 100, the 80 people who can't get into the housing, are paying more than 80% of their monthly income for housing. Therefore, we see this constant turnover of evictions for very many reasons. And there's this quirk in the Nevada state constitution that no housing case can be appealed to the Court of Appeals or to the state Supreme Court. So we are always in district court relitigating the issue over and over and over again. That's why housing is such a high percentage of our caseload. But we are seeing an increase in agricultural work issues. It didn't used to be an area of law or concern in Nevada, but all those people from California are moving over. They're bringing, farmers are moving over into the state of Nevada because we have no regulation regarding farm workers. And so they're learning that and they're coming over and farming in the state of Nevada, and now it's a problem. And so we have been very grateful for the training that the other programs have put on so that our staff can learn what this brand new issue is and how we can best serve that population.
I had 2 quick points I was going to make. That might be a little off topic, but then Jim can jump back in. One was, I promised I would say, that we also did a day before one of our meetings, a pre-meeting day, focused on the LSC regulations. There are LSC regulations, I had to say this while Jim is here and Laura's sitting right there. A number of regulations that require us to have written policies. And we realized as we were communicating by email that we didn't all have up-to-date policies, so we got together for a day and had a workshop day where we all went through our policies and updated all of our LSC policies. And the other thing I just wanted to say, Jim, was Jim has been so kind as to fly out to all of our meetings while he's been president and to tell us what's going on in Washington, D.C. and give us updates. And it just really makes the meeting very meaningful for us to come and to hear from you, Jim, so we just want to tell you that we appreciate you coming.
Thank you. It's very useful for me, too. It's a very efficient way for me to hear what's going on from people on the ground in the field, and I'm grateful to be invited to your meetings.
And then I really don't have a whole lot to add in terms of the kind of, we're seeing the same issues. I think this whole region is growing in a very similar way. Colorado, I think the whole Intermountain West is a growth area in this country. It's interesting, I used to live in the Midwest, and when I lived there, it was a very different situation, and it was more of this, it was a time of decline there. I hope it's not now, but here it's just the opposite, that it's, our biggest challenge is, can we get ahead of the demand so we can stay relevant? Because we're not serving as many folks as we should, we never have. But when we're growing as fast as we are, how can we get the most bang out of every dollar to give the maximum client impact? I just want to give a quick example. We have one satellite office at the Nampa Family Justice Center, and that's a family justice center where we co-locate with domestic violence providers. So there's police, there's counselors, there's prosecutors. And 2 years, in 2017, we have 2 attorneys there. They had over 600 referrals of victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. In 2017, they had over 700 referrals. And this year, we think we added a 3rd attorney there, and this year we think we're going to have over 800 referrals. Now, it's not possible to serve those folks. So we use a lethality assessment, and it's scored, it's developed by the state police. It's scored at 1 to 7. 7 is the greatest risk of death, and 1 is the lowest, and we're representing people at 5 or higher. So how do we, and all these groups have the same issues in terms of how can we try to get ahead of that population growth? And I don't have the answer, but that's the challenge.
I want to thank our panelists. I think what you're seeing, 2 things here. I think that the collaboration they have among their programs is itself a best practice. Don't reinvent the wheel. Learn from others who have challenges similar to yours. And the second is that one of the greatest assets that the leaders of LSC-funded legal aid programs have is each other. And this is a group of people I think you can see who take advantage of that, and we're all better off for it. Please join me in thanking them for their presentation.